Chapter 8. With Papa back, our cubicle was filled to overflowing. Woody brought in another army bunk and tick mattresses up next to Mama's. But that was not what crowded the room. It was Papa himself, his dark, bitter, brooding presence. Once moved in, it seemed he didn't go outside for months. He sat in there, or paced along a great deal of time. And Mama had to bring his meals from the mess hall. He made her bring extra portions of rice or cans of the syrupy fruit they served. He would have saved this up and concoct brews in a homemade still he kept behind the door. Brews that smelled so bad, Mama was ashamed to let in any visitors. Day after day, he would sip his rice wine or his apricot brandy, sip till he was blind drunk and passed out. In the morning, he would wake up groaning like a demon in a Kobakai drama. He would vomit and then start sipping again. He terrified all of us, lurking around this tiny room, cursing in Japanese and swinging his bottles wildly. No one could pacify him. Mama got nothing but threats and abuse for her attempts to confront him. I turned 8 that fall. I remember telling myself that he never went out and never associated with others because he thought he was better than they were. He was angry at being forced to live so close to them for the first time in his life. I told myself they whispered about him because he brewed his own foul-smelling wine in our barracks. All of this was partly true, but there was deeper, uglier reasons for his isolations. I first sensed it one night when Mama and I went to the latrine together. By the time the stalls were partitioned, 2 Terminal Island women, about Mama's age, were leaving just as we walked in. They lingered by the doorway, and from inside the stall, I could hear them whispering about Papa, deliberately, just loud enough for us to hear. They kept using the word una. I mean, it meant dog. I thought at the time they were backbiting him because he never socialized. Spoke Japanese in full of disrespect, insult words that could be much more cutting than mere vulgarity. They have to do with bad manners or worse, breaches of faith and loyalty. Years later, I learned that una also meant collaborator or informer. Members of the Japanese American Citizens League were being called una for having helped the army arrange a peaceful and orderly evacuation. Men who cooperated with camp authorities in any way could be labeled una, as well as those genuine informers inside the camps who relayed information to the War Department or to the FBI. For the women in the late night latrine, Papa was an una because he had been released from Fort Lincoln earlier than most of the icy men, many of whom had to remain up there separated from their families throughout the war. After investigating his records, the Justice Department found no reason to detain him any longer, but the rumors was just that. An interpreter he had accused, but the rumor was that as an interpreter, he had access to information from fellow ISISes that he later used to buy his release. The whispers charged, added to the shame of everything that had happened to him. was simply more than he could bear. He did not yet have enough strength to resist it. He exiled himself like a leper, and he drank. The night Mama and I came back from the latrine with the newest bit of gossip, he had been drinking all day. At the first mention of what we'd overheard, he flew into a rage. He began to curse her for listening to such lies. Then he cursed her for leaving him alone and wanted to know where she had really gone. He cursed her for coming back and for disturbing him, for not bringing him food on time, for bringing too much cabbage and not enough rice. He yelled and shook his fist, and with his very threats, forced her across the cluttered room until she collided with one of the steel bed frames and fell back onto a mattress. I had crawled under another bunk and huddled, too frightened to cry. In a house, I would have run into another room. But in the tight little world of our cubicle, there was no escaping this scene. I knew his wrath could turn on any one of us. Kyo was already in bed, scrunched down under the covers, hoping not to be seen. Mama began to weep great silent tears, and Papa was now limping back and forth besides the bunk like a caged animal, brandishing his long, polished North Dakota cane. I'm going to kill you this time. Go ahead if that'll make you happy. You lied to me. You imprisoned me here with your lies. Kill me then. I don't care. I don't care. I can never go outside because of you. Here, here is my head, my chest. Get it over with. Who wants to go on living like this? She lay very still, gazing up at him. The tears had stopped. Papa stood over her, gripping his cane with both hands, right above her head, holding it so tightly the cane and both his arms quivered. All right, he yelled. All right. I will, I will, I will. We had watched many scenes like this since his return, with Papa acting so crazy sometimes. You could almost laugh at the samurai in him, trying to cow her with stare nose and fierce display. But those were still unfamiliar visitors from the demons we had never seen when we lived in Ocean Park. There had always been doors to keep some moments private. Here, there were no doors. Nothing was private. And tonight, he was far too serious. He seemed to have reached some final limit. Inside my own helplessness, I cowered, sure he was going to kill her or hurt her very badly. And the way Mama lay there, I believed she was actually ready to be beaten to death. Hio must have felt something similar, because at the height of Papa's tirade, he threw his covers back, and in his underwear, he jumped out of bed, yelling, "Stop it, Papa! Stop it!" With his cane in both hands, high above his head, Papa turned from the waist. Kyo sprang across the room, one arm cocked, and punched Papa square in the face. No one had ever seen such a thing before. Papa's arms went limp. The cane fell clattering to the floor. He reached up and touched his nose. Blood was pouring out onto his shirt, dripping down onto Mama's dress. Kyoto stepped back, crouching, staring at the blood. This was like bloodying the nose of God. His face, contorted, looked ready to cry, but even his tears were stopped by the knowledge of what he had done. He waited paralyzed for whatever punishment might strike him down. Papa couldn't move either. He stared at Kyoto, his eyes wide with both outrage and admiration that his son had the courage to do this. They stood like that until Papa's gaze went barreling from the drink in his veins and dropped to the damp skirt, to the blood still spattering onto Mama's dress. Kyoto turned and bolted out the door. I ran over to Mama, whispering with relief that this ghastly scene was over and she had been saved, yet aching with the great sadness I could not, at the time, find words for. I was proud of Kyoto and afraid for what would happen to him. But deeper than that, I felt the miserable scene of loss that comes when the center has collapsed and everything seems to be flying apart around you. Kyoto had fled to one of my married sister's barracks. For 2 weeks, he hid there. When he finally returned, it was to admit that he had been in the wrong and to ask Papa's forgiveness. He too wanted some order preserved in the world and in the family. Papa accepted his apology, and this settled the water some. But that aching sadness did not go away. It was something undefinable. I'd already been living with for four I've already been living with for months, now inflamed by Papa's downfall. He kept pursuing oblivion through drink. He kept abusing Mama, and there seemed to be no way out of it for anyone. You couldn't even run.